Well, good day. My name is Keith Henry. I'm the president and CEO for the Indigenous Tourism Association of Canada. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today during this labor market forum, talking about the impacts on Indigenous tourism across this country. I do want to start by acknowledging the territory that I'm in. I'm joining you today from Vancouver, British Columbia, which is the traditional territory of three particular First Nations in this area, the Squamish, the Musqueam, and the Tsleil-Waututh, and I want to honor them for their territory. And I also want to say, as a Métis person, I'm just honored to continue to serve the role I do within Indigenous tourism in this country. Having said that, we know that this past year has been a really significant challenge for the tourism sector, and in particularly a number of the Indigenous tourism businesses that we work with across all parts of the country, from the north, the east, the west, rural, remote, urban. So there's really significant challenges that I think all of us recognize are in front of us. Today, what we're going to try and do during this session is shed a bit of light on that. And in saying that, I've got with me today Teresa Ryder, who's our Director of Business Development, and she will actually do the presentation, so you'd have to listen to me for too much today. But certainly, I'll have her introduce herself. I guess, why don't you introduce yourself right now?
Good day, everybody. My name is Teresa Ryder. As Keith said, I'm the Director of Business Development for Indigenous Tourism Association of Canada. My family's from the Musqueam First Nation, which is here in Vancouver, and I look forward to presenting some of our information, our key findings from the last year, and how we have plans to go forward.
Well, thanks, Teresa. And I think what everyone will see today is the format of this session will be simply just a quick introduction that we've done. We're going to share a video that some of you may have seen, but we feel it's extremely relevant to set the context of the presentation today about the state of Indigenous tourism in our industry in Canada. We released it in December 2020. We think it's quite relevant to what we're doing today and to the people that we work for and with across First Nations, Métis and Inuit communities and entrepreneurs. And we'll cut to that shortly. After the video, though, Teresa is going to walk us through a bit more of a specific update and some of the more, I guess, specific impacts we're seeing for labor market challenges and business development challenges across the country. So with that, before I cut to the video, I also want to say it's an honor. I also serve on the Tourism HR Canada board. And I think us working together, especially coming out of what we hope with the vaccines in front of us, will be a much more productive 2021 and allow us to start rebuilding our sector is critically important at this time. So I'm honored to serve in that role as well. So with that, I just want to take a few moments and allow us a few minutes to share the video of the state of the industry for Indigenous tourism in this country.
So quiet. I mean, it's supposed to be quiet. That's why people come here. It's really tranquil, but it's not that kind of quiet. It's the sound of absence.
Indigenous tourism, we've seen so much positive growth in the last 5 years. We saw just about 500 new businesses start up across the country. Small mom and pop stuff, entrepreneurs just really saying, I'm gonna embrace my culture beyond the economic opportunities. What I love the most about it is the social cultural impacts. People being proud of who they are, realizing their story is important, realizing that their lives matter, realizing their community matters, realizing their sense of ownership in this area and across Canada are important to the fabric of this country. 20, 30 years ago, as an Indigenous person, I didn't feel that at all.
Indigenous culture is all about sharing, and that's ingrained in us. Like we like to share who we are, we like to share our experiences, our stories.
Now we've been, as a family and as a group, have been sharing our culture for the last 30 years with, anybody that was interested.
When they're there in our teepee, in our trapper's tent, out in our camp, it's a special time we share together, and I think educating and bringing awareness to the world about our Indigenous culture is very important.
I want to be part of the found generation, that generation of Métis people who are going to bring Métis culture back to Canada and back to the world. And the way that I think the best way to do that is through Indigenous tourism.
It's sort of hard to believe the story that's unfolded in the last year. Indigenous tourism in 2019 had our best year ever. It just felt like we were unstoppable at that time. and then March hit.
Basically, all of our operations have come to a cease, a closure. People didn't realize, I don't think, till halfway through the summer when you went to campgrounds and you went to these places and the roads and everything's quiet. And people started talking about what it's like with no visitors here. And yes, we're keeping our community safe and we respect that. But it also changes who you are.
Our clientele, 99%, was out of country or across the border with the United States. When those borders closed, we were left standing here going, what are we going to do now?
The backbone of North Star Adventures has been our staff. When the pandemic hit, we had to lay them all off, and that was sad because part of our family is gone now.
You know, we're not like any other tourism business. So have 39 sled dogs that still eat the same amount of food every day. They still need their vet checks, vet bills come in. They still need their straw in their dog houses.
We immediately began to think about what do we need to do to try and change things. We called on the federal government for $16 million because we knew we were going to have to try and stabilize hundreds of businesses, not just a handful. Many of our small businesses lived hand to mouth, and and their sales would drive, could they survive or not?
I think without any stimulus grant funding, we wouldn't have never survived. That little short amount of money that we've gotten, we're lucky we're a small company that we can get through that. And now we're at that stage where winter's here. This is where we have to bunker down, and this is really starting to affect who we are. This is going to get even harder.
I know there's a lot of businesses, Indigenous businesses across the country, that are not going to survive this. There's a lot of businesses in general. The tourism industry, the restaurant industry, everybody is going to have a difficult time.
The Creator has given us an opportunity, but also it takes away. And how do we adjust? How do we make it happen? The ones that survive will survive. And the ones that do leave us, we'll always remember them who they are, because they put their heart and soul in. They're no different than we have.
Everyone realizes what's at stake. This isn't just about businesses and a business sector. This is about an entire set of nations trying to find a way to stabilize. If things go the way we hope they don't, but if they do, we will have less businesses standing than we did in 1990. So that's 30 years lost. I think what concerns me the most is the potential loss of the belief that you can share your culture and actually survive doing it. If that's lost, where will the young people be in the next 10, 15 years about that sense of culture and pride, watching the elders, watching the performers, watching the artists? That can't be replaced.
I don't mind going work somewhere else, but it'll be sad because I love tourism. I love showcasing our Yellowknife, our Aurora Borealis, and our culture to the world.
Tourism is the hardest hit, and we're going to be the last to recover. It's going to take a while for people to trust traveling again and all that stuff. So that, we really have to, try to get through this pandemic, and with the federal support that we've had, it's been awesome, and it's been really helping us out, and we're going to need more.
Our kids who are adults, went and worked in other industries. They went and worked in mining, and my daughter has moved away right now to go work with oil and gas down in BC.
I know in the communities, they're proud of who they are, they're proud of all the things they've done, but they need a sustainable economy. We have mental health issues, suicide, loss of hope, and these things all contribute to people with incarceration, alcoholism, spousal issues at home, just a complete devastating effect.
I think of my business partner who struggles. He told me the other day that he was, thinking bad thoughts, and it's not something I want to see my brother do.
If anyone sat in my chair and took calls from the hundreds of business owners that I've talked to that are in community or living outside of community but have lost hope, it's the threat is real. And I feel so emotional after, because I haven't got anything to say to other than just try and give them a bit of hope, in a sense that we're there and we got their back as best we can right now.
I just want to get back working. I don't want to sit. This is way too long of a holiday for me.
We're very hopeful that By next year's Aurora season, which is August 15th, the global travel will have resumed by then, but if we don't get additional funding in that regard, then we are into Plan B, which is selling off assets.
The time for action is right now. We have a second wave of response that calls for 18.3 million, about 6 million for specific marketing. We want to go back to those 678 businesses. We want to top them up to give them a little bit of operational resource so they don't just completely go insolvent, bankrupt, or just completely lose sentiment and disappear. We were a driving force for the tourism economy. If we stabilize it enough, Indigenous tourism will come out further ahead than ever before.
The tourism industry will open back up fairly quickly once the vaccine is out and everybody gets vaccinated. The borders will open back up.
I believe Indigenous tourism should be that word that people say first when they're coming to visit Canada. We're the first stories. We're the first people of the land.
We're resilient, and we will get through this. And no matter how many waves COVID-19 throws at us, it's our responsibility to get through this and to stabilize ourselves, because our work today will have a long-term impact. And I think more than ever, that's our biggest responsibility going forward.
Surviving, our people have done it for generations. And we're still here today and we'll still be here tomorrow. And that's something that I really hope that everybody across Canada can hold hands and pray that we get through this.
Thank you, Keith. And I hope that that video has really demonstrated the impact that COVID has had on the Indigenous tourism sector. Part of the reason why I love the job that I have to do in this country is I get to work with so many entrepreneurs and business owners from coast to coast to coast. And the pride of our people really shines through in our tourism experiences. So this is why we feel like it's particularly important to stabilize and rebuild the Indigenous tourism sector. And as Keith said, I have some new insights to share with you today about the state of our labor sector and some of the impacts that are predicted as a result of the pandemic. Before I move on, I just wanted to let you know that we are online. So if you have any questions, feel free to interact with us on the chat box, and we'll do our best to keep up and answer all the questions that come. So for those of you that don't know us at ITAC, we are an industry-focused, industry-led national nonprofit. We have a membership base of Indigenous owned and controlled businesses from coast to coast to coast, and we're proud to be represented as well by 13 elected board members from each of the provinces and territories who have the interests, of course, of their stakeholders, their members in mind. Our mission is to provide leadership in the development and marketing of authentic Indigenous tourism experiences through innovative partnerships. And I really can say that at ITAC, we can't do it alone. We rely on partners throughout the industry to lift our businesses up, to find a path forward, to offer support in development and marketing, and really make sure that the tourism sector, the Indigenous tourism sector, is successful. And our vision is a thriving Indigenous tourism economy, sharing authentic, memorable, and enriching experiences. So really those one-on-one moments with our people to share the cultures, the diverse cultures from coast to coast to coast. So I wanted to share a few insights about ITAC's response to the pandemic. So immediately last year, end of March, early April, when kind of all of our worlds were turned upside down, if you will, we developed a new action plan that included a domestic focus. The action plan was revised with targets and plans to respond to the needs of the operators during the pandemic. And the key indicators were adjusted to reflect the current situation of travel to Canada and really focusing on the impact that that had on our members. So of course, for the industry, with international borders closed, even in some cases, provincial or territorial borders closed, that had significant impact on our businesses. We immediately pivoted from international marketing to domestic marketing with hyper-local awareness campaigns to encourage Canadian travelers to experience the Indigenous tourism product across the country. We ramped up our advocacy and outreach. We were forced to respond on behalf of our membership to ensure fair and equal access to the federal support programs. We're continuing to work on this point with our federal partners to make sure that our businesses are not facing barriers to the federal relief that is available, and doing our best to understand why it is that our businesses are not as actively accessing things like wage relief and rent relief. Given different circumstances, it seems like there's so many nuances with Indigenous businesses. So we're continuing to work with partners at the federal level to understand those, as well as working with our membership to understand what their needs are. We really want to make sure that our members are accessing funding no matter where they're located in the country. So for some of the sector or provincial or territorial relief programs that are available, we also want to make sure that they're taking advantage of any Indigenous programs that are available. And many of you might not be aware of the realities of some of our businesses. There are several different rules for being on reserve or off reserve, and of course also making sure that our businesses that are community owned are being supported. So there's kind of lots of different nuances with our business community that differentiate us in our needs from what I would consider the more mainstream tourism sector. We did call for support in about $557 million in long-term refinancing tools, plus $16 million in immediate relief for grants. And I'll get into that a little bit more detail as we move through the presentation, but really using those funds to stabilize the industry and rebuild effectively as we move through the phases of COVID-19. We also knew very, very early on that we had to measure the projected impact of the virus on our operators. So for those of you that have taken in an Indigenous Tourism Canada presentation in years past, ITAC and its members were on a great upward trajectory. We were seeing growth that was outpacing the mainstream tourism sector. We were seeing growth in businesses, the number of jobs. We were seeing increases to the GDP, and it was growth that we had never seen before. Over the last 5 years, through ITAC support, through stabilizing our provincial territorial network of Indigenous associations, we were able to organize, stabilize, and build. That said, as we all know, and as I've said, the virus really knocked the industry down very quickly. We partnered with the Conference Board of Canada in April of last year to look at the devastation that was ahead of us. So Conference Board of Canada moved forward with an assumption that we would see recovery in 2020 and be able to move into the next phases of moving forward with plans. We know that that didn't come to reality. So they projected at that time about a 65.9 decline in direct GDP, or about $550 million in decline. They predicted about 59% decline in employment, down to about 14,000 jobs. And we're continuing to evaluate what the impact of the long-term closures of borders and the lockdown restrictions will mean for our sector. And so coming into the new fiscal year, we will be updating the Conference Board of Canada data again to make sure that we're most current in the state of the industry. But just to note, these projected losses will take us back as an industry to what we saw in the 1980s. So this has been a 30-year recession in Indigenous tourism, which is quite unfortunate, as all of us have invested time, effort, sweat, tears into Indigenous tourism businesses across the country. So it's a significant loss for our sector. And here you can see some of the projected losses. Of course, I'll highlight the big three, if you will. Ontario is projected to lose approximately $327 million in GDP. Quebec, $115 million. British Columbia, $174 million. But even if we look at some of the smaller provinces or territories, Prince Edward Island is projected a loss of $2 million. So these are direct dollars that are going back not only into Indigenous communities, but into the communities at large. And similarly with jobs, they're not just Indigenous jobs, they're jobs for the greater community that we share with our neighbors. So this is a devastation, without a doubt, to the progress that we've made and directly impacting our communities, our people, and our economy. So in early last year, we launched the ITAC stimulus grant program. This allowed 680 businesses to access grants for up to $25,000 each. They were distributed in 6 phases from May to October, and it wouldn't have been possible without support from Indigenous Services Canada and ISED. They were kind in allowing us to realign funds as an immediate response, and then, as noted, about a $16 million grant portfolio was announced in June of last year to support our businesses. So we've just begun to analyze the data of the impact of that fund on our businesses and understand what the impact of the funds are. And as I said, how can we get more equitable access for our businesses to other federal relief programs, understanding where our dollars were spent through that program, how can we offset, how can we access more relief, who else has funds available, and how can we be allies for our businesses in equal access to this. So some of the findings, 93% of our businesses reported a negative or significant negative impact to their business as a result of COVID-19. I think sector-wide, that's not surprising as we move forward in understanding and continue to understand the barriers faced, as I said, with borders closed, health regulations restricting travel. 28% of our businesses changed or adapted their product offering as a response to COVID-19. So this was a goal of the program. We wanted to see which of our businesses, if any, could we support in realigning their product offering, could it be a virtual tour? Could they adapt their tour size so that they could still take people out, etc. So 28% of our businesses did that, which is a good indication, I think, in response. And then others, of course, may have been able to continue in a similar way as before, just meeting the restrictions of their provincial or territorial health authorities. Lodging and accommodations reported the highest percentage of businesses that were able to sustain operations through 2021. Good news as well, those businesses were some of our obviously they're our biggest, some of our biggest contributors to jobs and revenues. So that is a little bit of a good news story, but also I think it's an obvious statement to the state of the industry and the ability to maintain health regulations in a safe way, just given the nature of the business. Interestingly, about 33% of the respondents, so the business owners, are Indigenous women. I think, given that we're coming up to, or we've just passed Indigenous or International Women's Day, that's a good statistic for us to keep in mind as we're supporting Indigenous women in our communities through this industry. And 62% of our businesses are currently closed, which is impacting about 75 to 100% of revenues. So obviously, not being able to operate is significantly impacting their bottom line. The most reported activities for ITAC funds included adapting the business to maintain jobs, reestablishing jobs lost as a result of COVID, and adjusting work hours or compressing the week, so limiting the operations and then using our funds to support overhead costs, etc. But I think this is an interesting approach to the use of our funds, in that our people are so integral to the ability to deliver Indigenous tourism. For those of you that have had the privilege of working alongside or going on a tour with one of our operators, you know, I think our people really do make the experience and make it special for travelers. So it's a good indication that we're trying to maintain jobs in our communities with our businesses. However, we do know that there's going to be quite a decline in the return to pre-COVID staffing levels based on 2021 bookings. Only 53% of businesses anticipate that they will be able to return to pre-COVID staffing levels. And that, of course, assumes that the 2021 season will be able to go ahead. And as we know, that is a risk to the sector right now. 41% reported that their staff are currently laid off. So using the same number of jobs between April and December, we're seeing a 41% decline. I should also note that the ITAC grant recipients did not include, for the most part, there were not many casinos that are huge employers, huge drivers of revenue to our economic impact. So with 41% of the workforce in some of the smaller operators laid off, that obviously is a big impact. And interestingly, we did our original intake in April of last year. Only 15% of those businesses 15% of the businesses that had indicated that they would be able to return to pre-COVID staffing levels no longer anticipate that this is the case. So reassessing, looking at what the business needs are now, we are seeing that there are some that no longer anticipate that they'll recover the jobs that they're lost. And interestingly, 51% of businesses underestimated their losses from when they originally applied to when they reported on the grant. And I think really this is probably the case for many of us. As we went into this time last year, we didn't know the duration and the impact that the virus would have on our business communities. So I don't think that this is completely surprising that there was an underestimation of the impact and the devastation, but really, you know, we are gathering more information, and there still are businesses left to report on this, so that statistic might change as the final results come in. All of this continues to support our new strategic plan. So as part of the work that we did last year, we created an immediate action plan, and then we also created a new 5-year strategic recovery plan that will take the industry through response, recovery, and resilience. So each of those phases with different triggers will have a different response from ITAC. Currently, we know we're in the response phase. We don't have any indication that we can begin to recover yet. Of course, we do know there are things that are changing daily that might impact the ability for us to move into the recovery phase, but also recognizing this through the different phases of the virus and the different waves that we've seen. Our plan continues to recognize that we could excel and then recede depending on how this continues to unfold. We're using research to continue to refine our direction. For those of you that know ITAC, I always feel like we're storytellers in our own right, using research as a means to tell the story and the impact that our industry is making on the tourism sector. So we worked with Insignia marketing research firm to conduct research to understand the relevance and the potential of Indigenous experiences in a domestic travel market. Of course, we were focusing primarily on export markets in years past, and Canadian travelers, while they made up a good portion of the travelers that we were seeing to the Indigenous experiences, we know that it's not enough to sustain our industry going forward. So the objective of this research was to understand the traveler's mindset, what their behaviors were, how we can drive interest and engage them in Indigenous tourism experiences in their future travel plans. And this research was really insightful because it told us a lot about what Canadian travelers are seeking when they're traveling. So for example, attitudes have shifted to embrace a slower, more mindful pace of life with loved ones, appreciating nature, simplicity, spirituality, and soulfulness. So that sentiment obviously aligns with a lot of our tourism experiences, where it is that one-on-one interaction with a business owner, with an Indigenous person, perhaps out on the territories, really experiencing the country through the eyes of an Indigenous person. We saw travel-related behavioral shifts, including a major surge to road trips within the province. So seeing that the Canadian travelers were aligning with what the health standards would be, staying fairly local, usually driving and spending time with their immediate family out to places within their own province in most cases. We saw that a specific domestic travel strategy and plan is needed. So our marketing team is working to develop those plans so that Canadians understand what Indigenous tourism is. And there needs to be, federally, there needs to be more resources placed on leveraging the value of Indigenous tourism and cultural experiences. So making sure that we're all working together at a national level to share these experiences as part of the offering that visitors might be coming to your cities, to your region, to your province to experience. We also saw that we needed to increase our digital footprint to have a more prominent position when visitors are making their reservations. We specifically noted that there was a step-by-step toolkit should be developed and designed for grassroots and guerrilla tactics. So getting our operators activated on the ground and making sure that the travelers know that they are there and that they exist and that they're accepting visitors, so that we can become more highly visible and alluring to travelers, speaking to their need state, as I said, looking for that slower paced tourism and finding that hidden gem experience that they're after. There also, the report indicated that we need to press for recognition with DMOs and provincial marketing organizations to create awareness of Indigenous tourism and push for, as I said, Canadian travelers to purchase this as part of their next itinerary. With this research came the Escape from Home, which is a marketing campaign designed to highlight local Indigenous experiences in several city centers across the country. Overall, results of this campaign were highly successful, including a lot of digital content. And with this campaign, there was more than 12 million impressions, over 200,000 engagements with the content, and you can see about 4,500 conversions and 48 new social followers. So it was very successful in appealing to local travel markets, and we were not bringing these campaigns beyond the reach of provincial boundaries, or even in some cases, really city boundaries, to drive local visitors and create awareness of product that the visitors might not have been aware of in years past. So ITAC is now addressing the second wave of the COVID-19 and all of its variants. We're pivoting to the reality that could not be predicted 6 months ago. I did note that there were triggers within our plan in case there was a recession in the virus, which we're seeing now. So we're continuing to work to create solutions to sustain member businesses. We do have a second wave recovery strategy that has been shared with federal partners for relief. We're continuing to call for support for member helplines. As I've said, we know our businesses are not participating in other federal relief, so we're asking for support to understand why and then give direct delivery of support to the members to access those better, as well as creating tools and training for the businesses so that they are well supported as we come out of the pandemic. We're also supporting online booking functionality. This is a response to the insignia research I just talked about, to make sure that our travelers are able to make a decision right now to purchase an Indigenous tourism experience, as well as focusing on new domestic marketing campaigns, which will be upcoming over the next 6 months. You may have also seen some of our awareness videos that were created. These have been shared through our social media channels. We also launched a PSA campaign, which you may have seen the commercials on several of the major networks, to continue to build Canadian awareness of Indigenous tourism and hope to inspire them, as I've said, to include an Indigenous tourism experience. We need the Canadian travelers to be out and experiencing our product in order to recover the jobs and maintain and hopefully rebuild the Indigenous tourism sector across Canada. So with that, the team is going to share the survey in the chat, so please complete the survey questions. And I am here online if you have any questions that you'd like answered that I haven't gotten to yet, or if you have a question or want to connect directly, you can email me, Teresa@indigenous-tourism.ca, and I'll be happy to have a more one-on-one conversation with you. I'll sign off for now, but I hope you've enjoyed your time with us today and that we've provided some insights, and wish you all the best through the rest of the Labour Market Forum.